Hey folks, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes for some more people to file in here. Probably we'll begin the presentation in about like 3 to 4 minutes. Thanks.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Joshua with eFolder. We have Tyler with Webroot today. We're going to go through the secrets of security, endpoint security, fighting back against malware. So here's some pictures of us. Joshua, CISO at eFolder, lots of security certifications, been around for a while. And then we brought in Tyler over at Webroot. He is far less of an executive than I am and more of a technical researcher. So he's going to really dive into the weeds with this stuff and give us a good overview of what we're looking at, since Endpoint has some very interesting stuff to it. All right. Tyler, are you there?
Yeah, right here. Glad to be here.
Hi, Tyler.
Yep. All right. So quick agenda. We're going to go through some endpoint critical controls just to keep some consistency between these webinars, and we'll do that very quickly and then dive into the meat with the Webroot overview today. All right, eFolder products, just as a reminder, so we back up stuff. We back up files and folders with Anchor. We back up systems with Replicate and Axcient, Office 365 with Cloud Finder, and then, of course, our original backup product, the File and Forward product. Today we're going to go through endpoint controls. So the idea is to give you a good overview of what CIS top 20 controls are important from the endpoint perspective. And here we go. So the first of those, inventory and controls. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because we talked about this in a few previous webinars, but it's important to be tracking endpoints. And most of you are very familiar with products that will be useful here. So the RMM product is great to use on inventory for endpoints. And then, of course, application whitelisting products and some of your other products can be used kind of as a way to get good visibility to when you have a new endpoint in the environment. In a larger environment, you might look at a NAC, a network access control product for something like this. But my guess is for most of your customers, they don't have that complex of a network environment. Secure configuration. So this is something that those of you that are moving into the MSSP or the MDR space might consider, is adding a file integrity monitoring solution to your SIM architecture. Build a product offering around, or they have an enterprise version, which is a little easier to manage. But there's lots of different file integrity monitoring solutions out there. Don't forget about your mobile devices. This is something that's overlooked a lot in security planning, and there's a ton of risk there. And then also don't forget about the clouds. So these are a few solutions that have some good secure configuration for AWS and Azure environments, Evident.io, Redlock. I think there's one called Dome 9 or something like that. So there's some good products out there that can help with configuring those virtual endpoints. Network ports and protocols, I'm also not going to spend a ton of time here since we've covered that pretty thoroughly in the network environment. It's just important to understand that OS firewalls shouldn't be overlooked. Hardening those down and keeping those to minimal ports is very important, and you can verify that and create a product offering for your clients with port scanners and BA scanners. You can create monthly or quarterly reports that you deliver to your clients, and that can be a whole nother offering that you provide to them. And Tyler, I'm going to hand it off to you for some of the exciting about endpoints.
Well, thanks for everybody. My name is Tyler Moffitt. I'm a senior threat research analyst with Webroot, and been with Webroot about 8 years now. I've been working in the threat research department, classifying malware, and I'll move forward over here. Webroot Overleader, we're a market leader in advanced next-gen, real-time, cloud-driven endpoint security. Lots and lots of cloud data we have. We have multi-layered approach with lots of the technologies we have, in selling our threat intelligence. We'll move forward. So as far as talking about ransomware, that's probably one of the biggest threats we're seeing right now, along with cryptojacking, which I'll go in if you guys don't know about that. So most of you hopefully should know what ransomware is. Those of you who don't know, sort of just recapping, it's basically stealing your files, ransoming it back to you for cryptocurrency. It used to be like Ucash or MoneyPack, but ever since cryptocurrency and the year-over-year gains as far as a investment opportunity, for cyber criminals are loving cryptocurrency because of also the anonymity they have, especially some of them like Monero have completely private ledgers that you cannot view X address, Y address to Z address. But moving on from ransomware to what's important now that you guys need to be concerned about is ransom worms. So obviously the WannaCry and the not Petya attacks, they were predicted. There were plenty of people out there and security professionals that had talked about, hey, look, this is the next big thing. We're going to see ransomware coupled with worm-like capability beyond just the normal spam email that you get sent out that people are falling for or clicking on, or social engineering, right? This is beyond social engineering. This is hitting computers where, in some cases, the computers aren't even connected to external connection to the internet. They're just on an internal network where one computer has connection to the internet, and the absolute ability to infect people was devastating. We're talking, over 100,000 computers infected in less than 24 hours. So what's interesting is that it happened all at once. It was everybody all at once. So I don't know if you can know this, but most history of malware campaigns being sent through phishing or however they're being done, right? They happen in time zones. So people, let's say, these cyber criminals from Russia or Ukraine or wherever they are, to have a campaign to go off, they usually program it to go off on a certain day. So Australia and New Zealand would hit that day first, and they'd be the first ones to see, the new phishing campaigns or new spam campaigns, stuff like that. And then it would move on to Asia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and Africa, and then the Americas. And that makes sense. But what we saw here with the, worm-like behavior coupled with ransomware, this hit everybody all at once because it exploited the server message block, SMB. If you guys don't know what that is, it's essentially a file sharing service that's built into Windows XP and up, right? And funny thing is, they were all patched. These were already disclosed and fixed by Microsoft, but it was, unfortunately, as we can tell, it's always after the fact, after the damage, and after people see how bad it is, that then they patch. So during this time where most of these machines were not patched is when they were able to hit. And what's also interesting about this prolific ransomware that everybody has been talking about for quite a while now, it's been out for almost a year, and it still is actually going. In case you guys didn't know, Boeing was hit recently by WannaCry like just a few months ago, and still trying to propagate. There was only 2 exploit kits out of the ones dumped. So the people who stole these exploit kits were shadow brokers. They're like sort of an anonymous type of hacker group that decided they wanted to disclose, hey, look, this is how the NSA is spying on everybody by using these, built-in back doors that they're using to deploy spying tools, right? Well, once this was disclosed and they found out how they're doing it, cyber criminals decided to take these techniques of backdoors and decided to use it to distribute malware, and in this case, ransomware. And so it was only Eternal Blue and Eternal Romance, which you should see on here, And so there's plenty more still out there to be used. In fact, people expect Exploding Can or Fuzz Bunch to be some of the next big ones we might see being used in the future. But it just shows that exploits really are ruling right now. And you can even pay for these for custom. These were leaked for free, right? But there are plenty of hacking groups out there that will find more if you pay them like $25,000 a month in Zcash, which is another Bitcoin alternative. So let's move on to WannaCry. Obviously, this was the most successful ransomware ever really deployed. This is what it looks like. And able to spread laterally throughout an environment, absolutely devastating, specifically into industrial manufacturing and hospital scenarios. So to give you an example of the type of machines that it took down, that were really important, that they had to reroute ambulances and turn away patients. We're talking like, blood test machines, x-rays, stuff like that. All these machines that essentially, they had a Windows operating system, but its sole purpose was just for one thing, which was running that MRI, running that laser or that x-ray or whatever. And the IT departments, they decided, we're going to essentially not give it external connection to the internet. They thought that was an effective way of potentially preventing, threat attacks. And to an extent, that was true. It only lasted for a while though, because now criminals have found a way to leverage this new type of attack vector that puts those definitely at risk, especially because so many hospitals, like over 60% of them, are running like XP machines because they had bought these X-ray machines or blood test machines or these specialized devices years ago, and they got it work. It's working, and they're like, it's not broke, we're not going to fix it. And so that mentality is likely going to change because holding on to your older operating systems, or people who maybe even running Windows 7 just didn't want to patch because they were in fear that their specialized hardware wouldn't work that's connected to it. That whole mentality is going to change because of imminent threats like this. Yes.
So what is something that our MSPs can do to try to be preventative of zero-day and APT type of attacks like WannaCry? What are some of the things that they can put in place? You mentioned that the network thing didn't work. But what are some approaches that might be more successful with some of these advanced attacks?
Oh, right, exactly. Patching is going to be number one. Making sure that have a rollout plan. It's absolutely put in foremost, a top priority. There's also, believe it or not, upgrading your operating system. While many organizations, especially in the MSP and enterprise space, as far as adoption from Windows 7 to Windows 10, it's only about 30%, which is a lot less we need it to be. As far as consumer side, it's over 70%. So that Windows 7 gave you a free upgrade to Windows 10. Only 30% of the SMB and enterprise space has upgraded. Upgrading to Windows 10 is a really good idea because Windows 10 was actually they were not subject to the WannaCry and not Petya, the worm-like ransomwares. And so that's definitely something. I have some more slides also that will talk about it, which is interesting. But yeah, definitely being proactive about it and understanding that the whole mentality of sort of acting as if there are people actively going after you and having this overconfidence is really not something that people should have.
Yeah, would you say that a good portion of ransomware attacks and these variations are patch related? So if patches are up to date and Windows 10 is doing automatic patching, you're protected against a lot of these?
Yes, a good portion. The other one I'm going to talk about is RDP. RDP is an absolutely huge one, and I'm glad you talked about your port scanners and making sure your ports are taken care of, because that one's absolutely huge, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Not Petya works. It essentially very similar to WannaCry. It actually happened not even 2 months afterwards. But what's interesting about Not Petya is this was designed solely as attackware. There was no way to get your files back. There was no way whatsoever for you to decrypt your files. It was destructionware under the guise of ransomware, right? They wanted you to think it was a ransomware attack when really it was just Russia picking on Ukraine. It was very clear because how it initially started, well, it did spread through SMB. The initial attack vector was a infected supply chain update. So it was anybody running the me.doc software. If you guys don't know what me.doc is, it is the Ukrainian tax software. So all these businesses and government and just infrastructure in general was running this software. They were first infected, and we're talking power plants, gas stations, cell phones, supermarkets, even all of Parliament was all shut down, all their computers. It was very clear, because it also happened on a Ukraine holiday, that Russia was just picking on Ukraine. So the implications of this are kind of big, because this is, really only the first time we've seen, ransomware uses destructionware to just completely take these computers offline and just to cause as much havoc as possible to a country. And so, down the road, I fully expect to see this being taken forward and attack other countries as well. So one of the things we found in our threat report is your operating system of choice is a big deal. So Windows 7 here and Windows 10, as far as comparing the two, Windows 10 is a little more than twice effective at just innately stopping different types of malware and attacks, exploits being, a big part of it. So this is, without really having any sort of security on here, this is just what you're subject to. So what will work on Windows 10 versus what will work on Windows 7. And so obviously Windows 7 was the overall main operating system affected by the WannaCry and not Petya. And so it's interesting, like I said, with consumers already have migrated over 70% at the enterprise and SMB level. They're approaching 30%, and so I understand it is understandable, because when you have these large and enterprise environment have hundreds of computers, maybe thousands of computers, OS migration, especially with BYOD, becomes difficult and potentially a multi-year endeavor. But it's important to know that as long as your operating systems are out of date or older, you are putting your organization at risk. And so now I wanted to move over to AdGolos, which is it's basically malvertising. You guys haven't heard of malvertising? I'll just basically explain how this works. But this is probably the most campaign that's been going on for years now, and they're getting even better and upgrading it even further. Where essentially, you're on any web page, you could be any sort of reputable website, doesn't matter at all. It's the advertisements, right? The advertisements on the side that you would click on. And so when you click on these advertisements, you would expect to be directed to that web page to look at that. When instead, that web page or that ad that's supposed to take you to a certain site has been exploited, and instead you are redirected to a different landing page where exploits will attack the system and inject code either into your browser or just straight up download malicious payloads. And there's many ways of going about it. All this software we have on our systems that we have to keep updated, like runtimes like Adobe, Flash, Java, Silverlight, even out-of-date plugins like WordPress plugins. You guys using WordPress? That's a big one right now. You got to make sure you keep up to date, because if you aren't keeping those up to date, they're potential attack vectors. And so even we've seen stenography, which is really advanced and interesting now. What they'll do is they'll just have an image, not as a payload, but what they'll do is inside an image, they'll pull instructions on how to download a payload, which is another way of obfuscating and sort of evading attack. So basically, this was initially used just for banking Trojans, right? But as we know, ransomware is such a, I hate to call it a business model, but it's so profitable that cyber criminals have essentially upgraded the AdGolos system to then deploy ransomware. That's like one of the key drops now. Is almost everything now leads to ransomware, because it's a payout scheme, and the business model works and has been established since essentially late 2013, when ransomware even became a thing.
Hey Tyler, we got a question from the audience. This is from Jason. Can these malicious ads just look like any ads? Is there anything that you can look for, even on the surface level, kind of let you know that they're not kosher, or is it just,
No, so I'll explain to you sort of how scary this is. Yeah, best practices is basically user education. So how this works, just to explain it to you, if I wanted to supply booby-trapped ads, right, I'm going to create a fake ad network, and then I'm going to submit legitimate good ads for a period of weeks, potentially months, so I can gain reputation in the circle, get good circulation on good websites, and then Only then, once I have good circulation on web pages that have lots of viewership, lots of traffic, then as a criminal, then I'm going to make the switch to the booby-trapped ads. And usually, you only do it for a few hours because the campaign you're trying to run really doesn't need that long to get that many clicks and that many people infected. And also, if you only run it for a few hours, you're really reducing the chance. So if somebody were to report it and say, hey, look, there's malware here, by the time that trickles down the system and somebody evaluates it, they've already turned it off and switched on to good ads, and no one can really tell, hey, look, no, they look fine. They look fine again. And so that's where it's really difficult and scary, is that they get clever with how they do this. So absolutely, best practices and user education is really the #1 way to try and prevent this.
Tyler, I see a misconception in the community still that something has to be downloaded to be infected or something like that. What has to be done here is a view of the ad. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not as if like it downloads and you see it at the bottom left as something that's downloading that you have to click on. No, in some of these cases with some of these exploits, exploiting these runtimes, what they'll essentially do is they will literally inject code into your browser once you've clicked the ad, and so it will actually be your Internet Explorer.exe, your Chrome.exe, your Firefox.exe that is then interpreting instructions from this exploited web page, and it'll actually be your browser process that is doing the encryption of your files, sending the keys over to the command and control server. And so that's really what's scary, is technically there is, in some of these cases, there won't be an actual payload on disk. It'll just be the browser process that's doing all the malicious action by injection. So super scary. All right, so let's move forward here and talk about the emergence of CryptoJacking. All right, so if you guys haven't heard about CryptoJacking, I'm glad I get to talk to you guys about it, because this may be what dethrones ransomware. People always talking about what's next after ransomware. This very well could be it. So ransomware is the whole process of, I'm going to steal your files, and then I'm going to ransom them back to you for money, right? So CryptoJacking is essentially, I'm just going to steal your CPU power while I have it, and then mine cryptocurrency to my wallet, and that's all I'm going to do. And it's been gaining a huge amount of momentum. Been growing. The growth of it is already outpacing ransomware. As far as whether it'll dethrone ransomware as the #1 threat may happen, but it's good to be aware of what's out there and what's on the forefront. So this first started like late last year. We're talking October of last year with CoinHive. If you guys don't know what CoinHive is, so ideally, altruistically, CoinHive created essentially this JavaScript that's supposed to be legitimate, that you would host on your web page, right? And you would host it on your web page, whatever it is. And so when people visited your domain, your websites, browsers would interpret this JavaScript, and it would mine cryptocurrency for you, the website owner. And it's basically, it was ideally supposed to be a way to generate revenue without displaying ads, right? That was how it was theoretically created. But obviously, thinking about it, there's plenty of opportunity here for criminals to just abuse this absolutely wildly. And that's what they've been doing, is they get these JavaScripts as if they were website owners mining to their wallet, but they inject these JavaScripts into websites they don't own. And they go after them all. In fact, some of the big ones we heard were Showtime and LA Times. So Showtime, I'll give you an example. People log into it just like their Netflix subscription. They're logging in to see what shows they have, and they would play them, right? And so you play it, you open it up in full screen, just interpreting the codec for that video file that you're watching. Likely doesn't even use maybe 10, maybe 15% of your CPU, depending on how old your computer is. And so there's a remaining of like 85% CPU that they can use then to mine cryptocurrency to their criminals' wallets, right? And so that's what they're going after, is if you're not using the computer, well, we're going to use it for you and steal it. Now, it's not a lot of money. People, wondering, well, how much are they making? Well, per processor, probably less than 50 cents a day, maybe further less than that. But ultimately, it's not about one computer. It's about having hundreds of thousands of these computers because you picked a good website to inject. And ultimately, there's no cost to them. Like, as far as how much, even if you let it run 24/7 on your computer for a whole month, you probably wouldn't even increase your power bill by maybe, $10 or so. So It's not much an individual computer, but if you've got an enterprise environment where you've got hundreds of computers, that's totally going to add up. So it's definitely something you want to watch out for, especially because even just actual file miners being dropped is pretty big right now. Mining for cryptocurrency in general, maliciously, is a really, really big thing. And as far as you know, why this is so appealing to criminals, why is there this shift over to cryptojacking from ransomware? I mean, you have to realize that even if these websites, right, that are injected and thousands or potentially hundreds of thousands of people are visiting, they're mining cryptocurrency to this criminal, and you have no way to trace it whatsoever. In fact, the footprint is so minor that there's actually only one action of illegal activity, and that would be breaking into the web page and injecting the JavaScript into it. Other than that, they just wait and collect the deposits every time they reach a certain amount of cryptocurrency into their wallet, and that's it. And you can't see where this address goes because they're always mining Monero, and Monero is just like Bitcoin, but the ledger is private.
Oh.
And
we got a question from the sorry Tyler. We just had a quick question. Yeah, from Linda. She wants to know if there's anything in particular, like, do you notice your computer, say, slowing down or something like that when when your computer is being used like this, or anything like that?
Okay.
Or your computer
So yes, depending. That's the thing. All depends on the age of your computer. So if it's using 100%, most of these guys, they're trying to jack it up to 100%, and you'll notice your fans kick on and get really hot, right? That's another thing too. They like to pick websites where they want you to think it's the website that's process intensive. So LA Times was hit. LA Times has like a section, like a subsection of their website where you can look up your area and find out if there are murderers or child rapists in your area, right? And it does use a decent amount of processing power, but I guess they're picking websites like that to where they want you to think if your fan kicks on, oh, it must be the website, right? And so that's what they're doing. They're also going after, obviously, any of these websites like the Pirate Bay where you torrent stuff, or any websites where you try and stream TVs or TV shows or movies for free that used to have just a whole bunch of obnoxious ads. They're all also migrating over to this CoinHive. And so a lot of people are looking to CoinHive, and they're like, CoinHive, what are you doing? You created this for good, for ad revenue for legitimate website owners. Why aren't you trying to stop this? And while they have their excuses of, oh, we try and create absolute mandatory opt-ins, but they never work. Cyber criminals are able to go about it. The reason why really CoinHive doesn't care is because out of all cryptojacking done, CoinHive collects 30%. And this is true with all the other copycats of like CoinHive. So
really,
yeah, they collect 30%. So what motivation is there for them if they basically created a new malware strain and cyber criminals are abusing it and they're making bank off of it as well? They can just make these PR statements of, yeah, we're sorry, we're trying our best, but ultimately they're still making bank. So yeah, it's a sort of shadowy, iffy sort of situation, and yeah.
So are you saying I should avoid watching Billions on the show now?
Well, Showtime got a lot of flack when they were first caught, right? And so they're monitoring now to make sure there's no JavaScripts like that. Usually you can tell. There are some things you can do. So a lot of times the CoinHive will go straight to the CoinHive domain, or the copycats like CryptoLuke or Rock. They all have the going to a strict domain, right? So obviously Webroot, we're going to be able to block it. Because we block access to the web page. There's also plenty of add-ons you can add, like NoScript or NoCoin, that are add-ons you can add where essentially we'll try and filter these to make sure those JavaScripts don't run. There are also browsers out there you can download like Brave, which are customized to manually not run scripts just in general, and then you have to enable them on demand. Because believe it or not, every website, most websites you're going to visit do have scripts of some sort running, so you do have to enable some, but we've entered this time now where we have to essentially evaluate them. What's super annoying, or I would think that it really big as far as implications, is this works any OS. This works Windows, this works Mac, this works Chrome OS, this works Linux, this works on Android, iOS, your phones. Your phones are probably the biggest, I would say, the biggest victim here, because with you don't really have your task manager to find out where all your processing power is really going on your phone, and all you can really tell, depending on your case or whatever, is how hot it's getting, right? right? And in some cases, I'm not even kidding you, we've seen where these phones, especially because it's super big on like trying to watch or stream movies for free or pornography, they'll open tabs, like silent tabs in the background that you can't see, and run it from there. And we've had reports where the phone gets so hot, it'll overload the battery will bulge, and it'll break the bezel of the phone. So it'll literally break the phone.
Wow.
And in some extreme cases, it'll just burn the chip out because it's not meant to run that hot that long. And so that's definitely something to watch out for.
So we got one more question from the audience, from Jonathan. He asks, is XMR using the CPU or the GPU more, and is there a way to notice this happening?
Great question. Great question. So it's CPU. Right now, as it is, most cryptocurrencies are going to mine using GPU, like Ethereum or any other ones using those type of algorithms. But Monero specifically picked an algorithm, and they hard fork every 6 months on it to make sure it's ASIC resistance, which is specialized chips. That it's specifically focused for consumer-grade PCs, right? They've made sure that no company like Bitmain or these miner companies are going to be able to make these super powerful chips that are going to be able to mine it and sort of make this unprofitable. So XMR, which is Monero, is making sure that if you want to mine Monero using consumer-grade CPUs is going to have the best. Like, you can still mine it using GPUs and it'll be good, but you'll probably have a better profit ratio if you mine Ethereum, right? When it comes to mining on consumer grade, like laptop, desktop, mobile phone CPUs, Monero has the best sort of ratio of profit, if you will. And that's what they're after, is they want that to make sure. And for as far as criminals concerned, that's a great thing for them. And Monero's, you know, very committed. Like I said, they're hard forking their coin every 6 months to make sure that it's resistant to any sort of, you know, manufacturing of special super chips. So we expect this to not go away anytime soon, and in fact, maybe even take over ransomware. Now we're going to talk about remote desktop protocol. Okay, so RDP, super convenient. We all love it. Being able to remote into a computer when you're not physically there is fantastic, but it doesn't come without inherent risks, especially if you're using default setup with Windows. So with Windows, by default, it's going to have your your username as admin, and you just have to, or sorry, administrator, and your password you have to come up with, right? It's also going to leave you open on port TCP 3389. It's also going to have no maximum lockout attempts. This is probably the biggest one that I can't believe they did. So essentially, just so you guys know, if I wanted to communicate and connect to your computer, it would prompt for the username and password, but I would have an unlimited number of attempts. So criminals will use brute force programs like Debrute. They'll grab a common username and password list in the darknet for purchase. Some of these have billions of lines of entry to try, and since they have an unlimited number of attempts, they are going to get in for sure. In fact, right now, there are over 11 million machines on TCP 3389. 4.2 million of those 11 million are speaking RDP. So right now, there are 4 million computers speaking the RDP protocol I can try and log into right now. Now, I'd obviously have to use a brute force program, right? But they're going to get in. Go ahead.
Hey, you know, is there any protection if I take a word, like, let's say we'll use the word dictionary, and I change all the ones to exclamations and put a 01 on the end or something like that? Does that help with these passwords?
It will help, but as far as making it foolproof, I hear a lot of people also ask too, what if I change the default port, change it from 3389 to something else, right? That will help, but like I said, it's a constant cat and mouse game where cyber criminals will then try multiple ports, all the ports. And as far as changing your passwords, that is always a good practice to have good password policy, and that will help quite a bit. Changing, yes, like sort of leet speak, changing, you know, I's to ones or whatever you want to do does help. I personally recommend adding spaces to passwords. Spaces are like help your password security exponentially. But what I would personally recommend, obviously, you know, there are plenty of things you can purchase to help protect you, like Webroot, eFolder. We all have options to stop this. But also, even, you know, just using encrypted VPN solutions like VNC or TeamViewer or log me in. These are all solutions that will take care of this completely for you, and I highly recommend because they're worth the money. But if you don't want to spend the money and you want to do it for free, yes, changing your ports, adding a very secure password, stuff like that, and absolutely setting lockout attempts, probably one of the biggest ones. Make sure like 5 seems pretty good. That's a pretty good one. And just to show you, yes, and just so you guys know how big and important this isn't just affecting consumers or enterprises. This is affecting governments like CDOT. I'm in Colorado. Our Colorado Department of Transportation, and also Atlanta, they were hit recently by SamSam. You guys heard of SamSam ransomware? It is exclusively deployed only through this attack vector and through RDP, right? It's the cyber criminals remote onto your desktop. They literally just throw the executable onto the desktop and they double click it and get it to run. And let's say your security solution blocks it. Well, they're on your desktop. They're going to be able to shut down your security solution, no matter what group policies you think you have or whatever's going on. So it's really up to user education. It's up to you guys. It does not matter what security solution you have. This is one area of attack vectors that you, as an education standpoint, are responsible for, and to make sure you're locking this down. And so in this, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We have we got another question from Jonathan. What about using things like TeamViewer with very complex passwords?
Yeah, no, exactly. TeamViewer in itself, you don't even I recommend complex passwords regardless, but TeamViewer is going to take your traffic as it is, and that will take care of this. So yes, absolutely. TeamViewer is great. Yep, I like it. And so SamSam, in this scenario of CDOT, our Colorado Department of Transportation, they saw their machine was hit, and they're like, we have good backups, we have good images. So I just wipe it, re-image it, we're going to be good, right? Well, they re-image it back, and guess what? Their RDP connection is still exactly the same. They left it exactly the same. So the cyber criminals, like a day later, log right back in with the same username and password and infect them again. And this is not an uncommon story. Like, I've been at conferences where people have told me they've been hit 3 to 5 times from the same person with the same ransomware before they were even able to pinpoint where this came from. And so strictly up to user education. This is up to your responsibility to ensure it's protected, because it doesn't matter what security solution you have. If they remote onto your desktop, they're going to be able to do what they want. All right, let's move on. Yeah, targeting attacks killing the weakest, right? Hospitals are really big for this. Perfect attacks for ransomware. In fact, I just recently saw an article saying that they are now sort of realizing, okay, we need to upgrade to Windows 10, more of our machines. We need to have patch management be like a focus. It's a shame that it's always after the fact, after the destruction, after the embarrassment or the havoc is being caused, that they look for it. But it's better than nothing. I would hate for that, to see all this happen and then do nothing about it. So absolutely, going after the weakest link is exactly what criminals are looking for. They're looking for, the CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, where they just have this mentality of, oh, we're good, we'll just re-image it back. And that really brings the point of user education, right? User error is a big issue. 95% of all successful cyber attacks are caused by human error, And so security awareness training absolutely is important. And luckily, we actually have just introduced it. And I'm really glad, because for the longest time I've been talking about user education, but I've had nothing to recommend. Finally, we have something. And I like it because it's beyond just the whole, let's take the once a year slideshow where you pick the obvious easy answer for your PCI compliance. I don't know what the hell that's actually really doing for anybody. But what I really like the most is actually holding people accountable, on a personal level. So phishing simulator is probably one of the most impactful and powerful tools I've found in an internal organization, where you get to send out sort of tests to your organization to see who is your weakest link, who is the one falling for it. Because it doesn't matter if 95% of your organization is trained and is educated and knows what to avoid, if you've got the remaining 5% who are falling for it and clicking for it, because it only takes one person to completely make your entire organization vulnerable and create a leak. It's usually HR, but that's just usually how it goes. So our Webroot Intelligence platform, powerful contextual analysis engine, constant feedback loop. We have over 52 million connected sensors that are feeding us this data, allowing us to classify billions of URLs on hundreds of millions of domains. We encounter like, millions of files every day that we have to determine with billions of file behavior records. And we've been doing this for years now with our automation and AI that we've been developing that make us have a really powerful product. So as far as to walk you through how this actually works, our multi-vector protection is what we're going for. We realize that you're never going to have one single attack protection vector that's going to be 100%. If anybody tells you they're 100% protection on anything, you walk the other way, because it's just not possible. You can't promise that, right? So right now we have, if you were to try and get a malware to try and infiltrate a system, you have to resolve an IP or a URL, right? First, make an established connection to that server, right? So we're going to try and block that at our URL bright cloud layer, right? And that's about 99% effective, right? So if that 1% does get through, so then you have 1% that then we have to analyze once the file's downloaded, but before any execution, we can look at the file, look at the topical information on the file, tons and tons of information. You can look at a file before it's ever executed. So we suspend execution, look at all those data points, leverage them with our billions of file behaviors we have in our cloud database, and then we're able to determine, hey, look, is this good or is this bad? And we have about a 99.7% effectiveness on that layer. And so still, you still have a little bit to squeak through on that 99.7%, factoring on the 1% that came through. You still have some that come through at the payload delivery stage. What is it doing in execution, right? And that's very similar to antivirus of few years ago that was just based on execution, just on static blacklists, right? What is it doing at a behavioral level, right? And so that's one of our last shields. That stop it on actual execution. And let's say that does fail, right? Let's say that does fail, and you are, let's say, have a ransomware on your machine that is able to encrypt your files. What we do is we have journaling and rollback. So what we do is we record the file, see what it's doing, because when it comes through and it's able to execute, it's still considered an unknown. So we monitor everything it does as far as creating, deleting, modifying files, creating, deleting, modifying registry entries, stuff like that, right? And so usually our average is about 10 to 15 minutes before we're able to determine an unknown file on your computer, too bad or good. But in 15 minutes can be enough time to encrypt your files. So if that were a scenario where you did have your files encrypted by that one ransomware no one's ever seen, unique to you, and 15 minutes later we determine it as bad, but it's already done its encryption, we have a record of all those files. And we actually, in those cases of if it's creating, deleting, or modifying files, we will snapshot those files and essentially effectively back them up instantly. And so we can, when we remediate the file, we can restore it back to a pre-infected state. And so that's what we're experimenting with. That's a constant cat and mouse game. We're always tinkering with it, but this is essentially the platform we've chosen, is to have a multi-vector protection layer for protecting all the different types of threats that enter in your system. They come in at different layers. Some of these threats will evade certain layers, so you have to make sure you have other layers in place. And that's the landscape we're in right now. And so I really appreciate everybody joining in for this webinar. That's what I have. I'm glad to be here with eFolder as well. I think that's it for now, and we can start answering any other questions we have coming in.
Let's see, we got one from Amen. So how about the false positive URL blocking? I have a client who's not able to access her banking website after I installed Webroot on her machine. Once Webroot was uninstalled, she could access the website fine.
Well, I can fix that pretty quickly here. I know exactly the guy who sits right across from me who can solve that. So if you want to send me an email, my email's not up here. I thought I had an email. I wish we could put it. tmoffit@webroot.com. That's tmoffit@webroot.com. Please, anybody, feel free to reach out to me if you have something like this. Feel free to email me what you got, and I'll be able to double check that and make sure I know exactly who can take care of that for you.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple housekeeping items. We will be sending out this presentation video and a copy of the slides, as well as a client-facing selling security brochure, as well in an email following this webinar. So you guys will have access to this whole presentation. No worries about that. And I can pop your email in there as well, Tyler, for anyone that wants to reach out about Webroot.
Oh, perfect. Appreciate that.
So one thing we did last time around, and we'll probably do it again, and Tyler, if you're okay with this, we'll include you in on it.
Sure.
We sent out a notice to everyone that attended the actual webinar, not those that are listening in on a recorded session, sorry. But for if they want to have a direct conversation with either Tyler or myself, about specific security questions, we can organize that. So last time we sent out my calendar and availability, and we'll send out Tyler's contact information as well for those of you that are on the webinar.
We have another question. It's from Levi asking, will implementing an RDS gateway help with the RPD issue in an enterprise?
So the question's around the remote desktop gateway, Tyler. Is there additional protections if they're using the gateway as opposed to just the local RDP?
You know, I believe so, but I don't want to. Last thing I want to do is tell you something wrong. So let me double check with that. Let me connect with that person offline on email and be able to tell them for sure.
And a lot of the threats are the same too, right? So you have, if you have weak username passwords, those are going to be found. If you're using a single word dictionary word or even something elite speak, you know, brute force tools make quick work of those. If you have no, you know, brute force protections like a lockout after a certain number of attempts, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's a gateway or the local RDP, you're going to run into those issues.
Right. Cool.
And that goes for almost any technology. If you're not securing and configuring these ports and protocols, then you're exposing your environment to risk.
All right, we got one more. Got one more question too from Zach Horton. Does Webroot have a blacklist for malware domains? How are these lists built? Is it built into Webroot DNS control?
So yeah, we have billions of URLs that are constantly reevaluated, all in use. So all 4.2 billion IPv4, all in use IPv6 are multiple times a day. It's constantly reevaluated. It's not like a static blacklist that's constantly moving. And yes, that is available not only on our Web Threat Shield, which is on the endpoint and consumer, you know, installation agent, but also at your DNS level, depending on what you've deployed, like which like policy you've chosen, will choose which is allowed and which is not allowed. I can definitely get you more information if we reach offline, and for any exact or particular questions, I'm more than happy to answer offline.
Yeah, he followed it up. He just asked if it was public or not.
Oh, I don't think so. I think you'd have to talk with somebody. That's just me. I'm not a sales guy though, so I don't know our sales material versus what I talk about. So.
We got another one in from a ref. What RDP gateway can you recommend to allow access to servers, terminal server over the internet?
I can't personally recommend any of them. Reach with me offline. Some of these questions, I'll talk with some people before I just blurt out something that I'll maybe regret later. So definitely reach with me offline.
Okay. Well, Tom, got to run. So thank you so much for your time. We really, man.
Not a problem. Glad to be here. Thanks for hosting me, guys. eFolder.
All right. In a couple weeks, our next Secrets of Security webinar will be about network security. We're doing a two-parter for that one. So stay tuned for invites in your inbox. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.